Hi everyone, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video we are going to be sewing. Yes. We're going to be sewing along to Mccalls 8035, and I'm going to be following along with view C on this pattern. In my latest video, I think it was a mini Joann's haul, I asked you all if you wanted to sew along. You all said yes, and I was ready for one because I really do love this dress. I think it's super easy to wear, cute, and just great for spring and summer. So I've already made it once, and I have more details for it over on my blog. So if you want to read about that, then I have a link for you below. I'm going to be using this double gauze fabric right here that I purchased from my local Joann's. And yeah, I really do like this fabric. It's nice, it's lightweight, but it's not like thin gauze. It has a nice weight to it while still being light and breezy. So I like this a lot. So yeah, go ahead and cut out your pattern, cut out your fabric, transfer all of your markings, and let's get started sewing. To begin sewing our dress, the first thing that we're going to do is put our front and back right sides facing, and we're going to pin at the shoulders and the side seams. So here is my back, and right sides facing. I'm going to match up my shoulders and side seams and pin it all in place. Once you have your shoulders and your side seams pinned, we can go ahead and stitch it at a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now that we have our shoulder seams and side seams sewn, I'm just going to show you mine. I have sewn the seam, I finished off the raw edges here with my serger, and I pressed the seam open flat, and I did that for both shoulders and both side seams. The next step is to go ahead and do stay stitching along the front edges as well as the back neck edge. Do not skip the stay stitching step. I know sometimes it's easy to just go ahead and bypass it, but don't do that. It really does help prevent stretching that could take place while we're constructing the garment, and we do not want our neckline and front edges to stretch. I already done my stay stitching, and it's done at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So go ahead and do your stay stitching now. Once you have done your stay stitching, we can go ahead and sit this to the side for just a moment and grab our facing pieces. Here are my facing pieces here. I have my back and my two fronts. You can see I've gone ahead and fused it with interfacing. So now we are going to match up the shoulder seams here of the facing and pin it in place, right sides facing. So you should have transferred a notch. You want to match that up and pin it in place. Now we can go ahead and stitch it at a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and after we have it stitched, you want to finish off the outer edge of your facing. You can finish it off with binding if you want. You can use your serger. You can just fold up a 1/4 of an inch and stitch it in place. You have a couple different options for how you want to finish off the outer edge. I'm going to be using my serger. So let's go ahead and stitch it in place now. Once you have your facing sewn and you finished off the outer edge, now we can go ahead and place it right sides facing to our bodice and pin it in place. All right, so first I'm going to line up my shoulders, and I'm going to pin in place there. Pin at the other shoulder, and now I'm going to match up my notches and continue pinning the facing in place. Once you have your facing pinned on, we can go ahead and stitch it at a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then you want to trim and clip into your curves. Now that we have it sewn and trimmed, we want to clip into our curves. Once you have it trimmed, we can go ahead and do understitching. With understitching, you want to make sure that you have your seam allowance facing toward the facing, and you want to stitch right here close to this seam. After you have your understitching done, you can see I have mine here. You want to go ahead and press it to the inside and then baste the lower edge of your facing. So I've gone ahead and basted the lower edges of my facing here. The next step, we want to go ahead and lap the right over the left. So I'm going to go ahead and place my left down, and I'm going to lap over the right. And I placed some notches down here at the bottom as well as some circles. So I'm going to match those up. Once you have your notches lined up as well as your center seam and the circles, you want to go ahead and pin it in place. And this is just the front two pieces that I'm pinning, not the back. Now we can go ahead and baste this in place. Once you have the lower edge basted together of your front bodice pieces, now we can go ahead and put this to the side and start working on the sleeves. For the sleeve, you want to go ahead and do 2 rows of E-stitching around your sleeve cap. I've already done mine. The next step after you have the E-stitching done is to put your sleeve right size facing, and I put a little X on the back of mine so I would know the wrong side of the fabric. So with right sides facing, you want to go ahead and line up your side seams, line up your notch, and pin it in place. Now we can stitch it at a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you have your seam sewn, you want to go ahead and finish it off with your serger, clean up your raw edge, and then give it a good press. Once you have your sleeve sewn and you've given it a press, you want to go ahead and press up your hem. So you fold and press up 1/4 of an inch of the raw edge, and then you fold up along that fold line that was on your pattern. So once you have that, you want to go ahead and press it in place, and then you want to stitch your hemline in place, leaving an opening to insert your elastic. Your elastic right here, here's my elastic I'll be using. You need to measure 3 inches below your elbow. So the sleeve doesn't come all the way down to the wrist. It stops just like a 3/4 length sleeve right below the elbow. So make sure that you get that measurement right below, 3 inches below your elbow plus 1 inch. So this right here is my measurement. I've cut 2 for both sleeves. And so now I have this hemline sewn and I left an opening for my elastic. I'm going to attach a safety pin. Once I have this safety pin on, I'm just going to go ahead and insert it into this opening that I left and just pull the elastic all the way through the hemline of the sleeve. Make sure that you do not lose this end of the elastic inside the casing, and just continue bringing your elastic all the way through. Once you have your elastic pulled through, you want to remove your safety pin and just kind of make sure that your elastic did not twist around. You want to make sure that there's no bends or twists in the elastic. Once you have it smoothed out, you can lap your elastic ends, lap them over, and now we can go ahead and secure the elastic in place. Once you have secured your elastic, you can trim off the little threads. And just distribute the elastic into the casing like so. And now we can go to the machine and we can stitch this opening closed. Alright, so now that you have one sleeve done, you want to go ahead and do the other one. Again, once you have your hem pressed up, go ahead and stitch close to that inner fold and leave an opening to insert your elastic. And then insert the elastic, secure it, and close the opening. Now that you have both of your sleeves complete, we can go ahead and install them to the bodice. So here's my bodice here. And first I'm going to line up my notches. So the single notch goes to the front and the double notch goes to the back. So this sleeve goes over here. I'm going to line up my side seam to my underarm seam, pin that in place. And now I'm just going to pin the sleeve in, and I'm going to pull up on my E-stitching to just ease out the fullness of the sleeve. So let's go ahead and install our sleeves now. You should have transferred a circle that matches up to your shoulder seam. Go ahead and pin there and just start to pin the sleeve in. Once you have your sleeve pinned in, we can go ahead and do the other sleeve the same way. Go ahead and pin that in, and then you want to stitch it at a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then go ahead and clean up your raw edges with your serger. Once you have your sleeves installed, you can see here I've gone ahead and finished off the raw edges with my serger. So after you have the sleeves installed and you have finished off the raw edge, we can put the bodice to the side and start working on the skirt. To begin working on the skirt, I have my front and back here. You can see I've finished off my edges with my serger, so I have all 4 side seams finished off with the serger. And I'm just going to place my front and back right sides facing. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pin down my right side seam completely down, and on the left side seam we should have transferred a circle. So I have my circle here. I'm going to stop pinning at my large circle. So let's go ahead and pin our side seams in place. Now that you have your side seams pinned, we can go ahead and stitch them at a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. I do want to mention that over here on the left side where we stopped at the dot, I actually brought mine down 7 inches from this dot, and so I'm going to be stopping here instead of here. And again, I just came down 7 inches from that circle. And that's just personal preference. That's just what I want. You can definitely stop here if you're comfortable with that, but I just wanted mine to come down a little bit more. So after you have it pinned, we can go ahead and stitch it at a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then press your seams open. Now that we have the side seams of our skirt sewn and we have pressed our seams open, now we can go ahead and grab our bodice. So here's my bodice here, and I forgot to mention to make sure that you tack down your facing up here along your shoulder seam right here, just to keep the facing in place. I actually just stitched right here in the seam because this is my dress and that's what I wanted to do, but you can most definitely get a needle and thread and just tack it down. That is what's recommended in the pattern instructions. So go ahead and tack down your facing if you did not do that. And now we can go ahead and put our bodice and skirt right sides facing. And I'm just going to slide this into the skirt right sides facing. Okay, once you have it in the skirt right sides facing, you want to line up your raw edges and then go ahead and pin it in place, matching up your side seams and your notches. Once you have your bodice pinned to your skirt, now we can go ahead and stitch it in place. I'm going to be stitching this at 1.25 inch seam allowance. Once you have your bodice and skirt sewn together, you want to go ahead and trim your bodice seam allowance down to 1/4 inch. That's going to help eliminate and reduce some of the bulk right here. Once you have that trimmed down, then you can go ahead and finish your skirt seam allowance. I finished mine here with my serger, and then you want to press your seam going up to the bodice. This is how we're going to create our casing. So again, after you have your bodice and skirt sewn together, trim down your bodice seam allowance to 1/4 inch, and then finish the raw edge of your skirt seam allowance and press it going up toward the bodice. After you have given it a press, you can see I've pressed mine going up toward the bodice. I've put a couple pins in just to hold it in place. So now I'm going to go to the sewing machine. I'm going to stitch 1/4 inch from this raw edge all the way around to create the casing. And I'm going to leave an opening to insert the elastic. So again, after you have it pressed, you can put pins in if your fabric shifts a bit. Sometimes the press is enough to keep it in place, but I've added a couple pins. I'm going to go over to the machine. I'm going to stitch all the way around, and I'm going to leave about a 2.5 inch opening to insert the elastic. So let's go ahead and stitch it in place now at 1/4 inch from this raw edge. Once you have created your casing, you want to go ahead and trim off your loose threads if you have any. All right, once you have created your casing, just take a quick look and make sure everything is looking nice. I want to make sure that this is flat right here on the right side of my fabric. So just give everything a quick look, and then we can go ahead and grab our elastic. So here is my elastic, and I used my elastic guide, which is pattern piece 12, and I just laid my elastic down over the pattern and cut according to the size. I've attached a safety pin to one end of the elastic, and now I'm just going to put it through the opening that we left to create our casing. So here's my opening here, and I'm just going to begin pulling the elastic through. Now once you have it, you can go ahead and secure both ends and try your dress on. Make sure that your elastic is straight in the casing, that it didn't bend or turn on you while you was pulling it through. Also make sure that the dress fits you comfortably. If you need to adjust your casing or your elastic, you can go ahead and do that now. And now we can go ahead and lap our ends over one another. So just lap your elastic and go ahead and secure it in place. Once the elastic is secured, you want to go ahead and pull it through and distribute the elastic in the opening. All right, once you have your elastic in, you can go ahead and stitch this opening closed. Once we have our casing complete, the last step is to work on our hem. For our hem, we're going to do a 5/8 inch narrow hem. So first you want to go ahead and press up 5/8 inch. Once you have that pressed, then you're going to open it out, fold in the raw edge to your crease, and then press back up for your 5/8 inch, and then you will stitch right along the inner fold. So first do the 5/8 inch narrow hem, and then we will work on our side opening. So let's go ahead and do our narrow hem now. Once you have your hem sewn in place, now we're going to do the same thing for the opening. Over here where we have the side split, we are going to create a 5/8 inch narrow hem along this edge. So you want to go ahead and press under 5/8 inch here, give that a press, and then you're going to fold in the raw edge to that crease, fold back up your 5/8 inch narrow hem, and then stitch right along the folded edge. Once you get up here to the circle where we stopped sewing, we're going to pivot. So you're just going to stitch right up here and pivot across at that circle, and then stitch down the remaining side of your slit. So again, create a narrow hem, press that in place, and then stitch up right along the edge all the way up here. Go about 1/4 inch past that large circle and then pivot across to the other side and then stitch down the remaining side of your split. Once you have stitched your split in place, you can give your dress one final press and you are all done. Well, that is all for this sew along. Thank you all so much for watching. I really do hope that you all enjoyed it. I cannot wait to see y'all pictures. So if you make it, please tag me over on Instagram and Facebook at Brittany J. Jones. I would love to see them. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you all in the next video. Blessings, everyone. Bye.